This video was produced by
I'm David Ehrenpreis. I'm the director of the Institute for Visual Studies, and we have a variety of programming. We have multidisciplinary classes each semester, and we also have a Colloquium series where folks from on campus talk about the research they're engaged in. And so this happens about once a month. You've got cards that tell you when the next ones are coming and what they are, so feel free to take those along. At the moment, we've also got an exhibition in the gallery, which is of an urban renewal project, two urban renewal projects actually, but it highlights one of the urban renewal projects that took place in Harrisonburg in the early 60s. And the question is how it has affected the Harrisonburg we live in today. For today, we're very happy to have Terry Brino-Dean here. Terry is director of the theater, associate professor and director of the School of Theater and Dance here at JNU. And his PhD is in theater history, theater theory, and literature from Indiana University. And his research focuses on all those things and also on gender theory and on performance study. And so he's going to talk today about, well, I should say about, his title for today is Playfully Empowering Stunt Runners in Momentary Performance. So thanks for coming. And Terry.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. I'm going to present just a piece of some research that I've been really working on for 5 or 6 years now. It's a particularly good time for me to talk about it because it is being published as a chapter in this book, Play and Performance, How Institutions Structure Ludic Performance. And so that's the sort of angle that this particular talk is going to have, because that's what we've been working on, revisions to that chapter. When I was first got into play theory, I saw this word ludic. I'm like, what is that? And so I thought I'd throw this in there just for fun, of relating to or characterized by play. So it just sounds more academic and fun. And I am a little concerned, though, about the drop in usage of the term ludic. Who knows what to make of that, but there it is. So I'm going to try to talk most of the time, but a few times I'm going to read a few things just to kind of help me articulate it most clearly. And so I'm going to start with a personal anecdote. It was mile 24 of the 2007 Richmond Marathon when it hit me like a ton of bricks. Except in this case, the bricks apparently affixed themselves to my legs as I struggled to keep my pace for the last 2 miles of the race. My mind was saying yes, my legs were saying no. As the tenor of this argument began to escalate within me, I heard someone singing. Soon I realized it was Blue Suede Shoes, and it was being sung through the tempo of heavy breathing. Yes, it was a runner, and he was coming up fast on my left. I tried to speed up, but it was futile. As he began to pass, I saw him. It was Elvis, dressed in his full regalia with polyester white jumpsuit, wig, or excessive hair gel, I couldn't tell for sure, and sunglasses. He carried a wooden cutout guitar prop, and yes, he was singing Blue Suede Shoes. He looked something like this. And I really think this was actually the guy. There are a lot of running Elvises, as we'll talk about. As he went by, all of a sudden, I realized I was audibly screaming. I had just been passed by a singing Elvis. At mile 1, he might have been a humorous and impressive sight, but this late in the race, it was, well, humiliating and demoralizing. I'm not above being humiliated, and most marathons I run become demoralizing somewhere along the way, but needless to say, this time it was different. At that moment, my running became decidedly anti-ludic, helped in no small part by the more playful performance of my Elvisonian competitor. So that's what I sort of start with as sort of a frame of my personal experiences with stunt runners. So what is this thing called stunt running? It primarily happens, it happens in road races where people don costumes or they engage in simultaneous activities while they run these races. So it increases the difficulty of the race. So what's really happening here? In one way, it heightens the nature of the athletic performance because of the overall exertion that's required from doing these extra things. And there's this extra layer of performance happening from these performed personas that they put on. So in this particular part of my research, it's an analysis using play theory in relation to power specifically. The power that I'm talking about is the road racing institutions that sanction, organize, sanction, and enforce the rules of these races. That's really what the stunt runners are playing with and against. Those rules that they create are obviously they measure athletic performance of anyone who's involved, and they're also meant to determine a fair winner. So the thesis for this work is that through their deeply embodied ludic performances, stunt runners create a frame for self-empowerment, destabilizing the marathon's purpose as pure athletic competition while playing on the same stage as world-class athletes who compete to win. So that's where we're kind of headed here. So stunt running defined. What qualifies as a stunt run? Well, there's two main factors involved. If we're going to determine if it's a stunt or not. First is the difficulty of the race, or the distance, which is usually the distance that we're talking about. And second would be the degree to which the distance is multiplied by the difficulty of the stunt itself. So just putting on a costume is really not enough. It's all these other factors that are involved. In terms of distance difficulty, the marathon's a sort of classic distance for recognized stunt runs, or that's where all these stunt runners are at least aiming for. And of course, with the increased distance, you have increased dangers of doing these stunts simultaneously for 3 to 6 hours, which I mentioned here could include compromised vision, heat, chafing, major danger, the exertion that's required, etc. So those are the things that happen when you increase the distance. The stunt difficulty, I say here, costumes are not a necessary part of qualifying as a stunt, and they also aren't sufficient. So just putting on a costume, like I mentioned, is not enough to qualify as a stunt. And there are some stunts that don't require a costume at all. So what it really has to do is the overall difficulty of the stunt itself. So that costume and/or activity has to add exponentially to the difficulty of the race. So what do I mean by this? Examples. Juggling, it's called. If you're juggling and running, that's an extreme physically difficult activity because of the focus that's required, the physical activity that you're doing. You're not swinging your arms. You're only using part of your body for the running. So for that, we say it's a stunt, and there's really no costume required for that. And in fact, the people who joggle are many times very competitive. They're certainly competitive against one another in terms of the world records that keep falling. An Elvis costume, well, here it kind of depends on the particulars of what the costume entails. If you have the full bedazzled polyester white jumpsuit, the oversized belt, the cape, and wig or hair gel, and the sunglasses, that starts to become on the nature of a stunt. Just putting on a simple outfit doesn't quite qualify. You get extra points, and it really, you know it's a stunt if they wear the boots, the matching boots, ouch, and if they carry a guitar. And the most extreme form of Elvis, running Elvis stunts, is they continuously perform the Elvis songs throughout the race. And that's what the dude who passed me was doing. So that's kind of what we're talking about. There are a number of legendary stunt runners who have really distinguished themselves. And so I'm going to flash through some images and talk about a few of these folks. We have Blues Brother guys. So here they're wearing, a full suit and tie. Sure, the hat and sunglasses, that's not necessarily a lot of fun, but you got to look at the shoes. They're wearing dress shoes. So it really does elevate itself to a stunt. And so these guys are known for running marathons all over the country as Blues Brother guys. Cowman Amuha, a.k.a. Cowman. He runs wearing the bull horns, heavy bull horns, and he varies between a grass skirt or an imitation grass skirt, which you see him wearing here. In that case, just the awkward nature of the and the weight of the bullhorn will qualify him as a stunt runner. We have many running Elvises. There's a team of guys who call themselves the running Elvises, who appear at a whole bunch of different kinds of races. Couldn't find a good picture of them, but they always carry guitars and wear the boots. I don't think they sing, but they might. Kermit the Frog is an infamous stunt runner. Notice the compromised vision on that one. The Dollies, it's a group of women who dress up as Dolly Parton impersonators and run marathons. And then we have Penny Man, who wears a, is it 35 pounds? Yeah, he wears a 32-pound suit made up of, covered in pennies, and consistently runs about a 3-hour and 50-minute marathon, which is respectable, carrying all that extra weight. Pancake Man. Pancake Man runs while continuously flipping a pancake. Claims to not have dropped a pancake in 45 marathons. Among a number of runners who joggle, the self-proclaimed the joggler, that's this guy in the yellow right here. He holds the world record time currently for a marathon while continuously joggling without dropping one in 3 hours and 7 minutes, which is insanity. Okay, and then this is one of my more scary ones. I couldn't find a good image of Get-A-Man, but Get-A-Man has run, I believe, 27 marathons now wearing these getas, which are Japanese clogs. He wears that to complement his full traditional Japanese kimono as well. So you hear him coming. Yep, ouch. And then the guy we call the king of the stunt runners, Coat Man, Dennis Marsala from Miami. What can we say? He's run over 130 marathons now, always dressed in a heavy denim-like jacket, dress shirt and tie, heavy socks, and he also wears wingtip shoes. He carries a champagne bottle. It used to be always on a pizza box along with some glasses, but more recently he's used a plastic tray with glasses, but always the champagne bottle. I'll talk a little bit about this later, but why did he start doing this? Well, he says that he was watching a TV broadcast of the Miami Marathon in the early 90s, and he saw somebody being covered who was crawling across the finish line. And he thought, what is the most extreme thing you could do to make, I guess, attract attention to himself for doing this, accomplishing this task? And he thought it would be to wear a heavy jacket because overheating is the greatest danger. So this image is from an interview where he wanted to pull out the book and show them. This is where it says it's the most dangerous thing, overheating. And so he is definitely an interesting guy. He does do a little bit of advertising when he's training in the Miami area now, so because he's very well known and is often seen there. So best realtor in town, and yeah, his wingtip shoes. So that is our guy, Coat Man. So these people are sometimes scorned by the running community and dismissed as sort of publicity hounds. But they do form a part of the spectacle of contemporary road racing. And these are just a number of the more well-known stunt runners. What do I want to do next? I refer to stunt running as an example of what I call momentary performance. Why is it called momentary performance? Well, there's a multi-layered performance that's going on at all times. It's the running of the race, which is in itself a type of play, as in not something that you would just walk around and do in everyday life. But those athletic performances are foregrounded by these personas that they create on purpose as part of the performance. The result of that is that they have their physical accomplishments are sort of magnified, and they're seen as more playful, and they talk a lot about their goal of entertaining spectators, which if we have time we might get into some of the things they say about it too. It's momentary because the performance is designed for a spectator who's sitting on the roadside watching the runner go by, right? So the performance only lasts a number of seconds for the spectator, for each individual spectator. As a result, so the real presence is momentary, so the full experience of the stunt requires the spectator to imagine the runner completing the entire 26.2 miles as a part of the stunt. So the appreciation of the performance, the recognition of the performance happens largely in the imagination, and that's what the stunt runner is trying to create, in the perception of that in each audience member, each spectator. So Susan Bennett and Karen Gaylord, both performance theorists, they talk about the two frames that are involved in any audience's experience of performance, and I think it's a nice model for us to look at in terms of stunt running. The two frames model the sort of double consciousness that the spectator has. There is an outer frame that sort of structures the experience. So in a traditional performance, like in a theater, it would be the theater company, it would be the building structure that it takes place in, it would be the conventions that we commonly accept as a part of that experience. And the inner frame would be the performance that happens in that space. So the audience has an aesthetic experience that involves all those things, from how they're prepared walking into the theater in terms of expectations they have, and then what they actually see and observe in the experience itself. So with stunt running, we say, the outer limits are the institutionalized power for these road races, some of which are multi-million-dollar operations and have major corporate sponsors. And then USA Track and Field, which is the organization that sanctions these events and provides the official measurements, they sanction the timing systems that are used, etc. All of this is aimed at controlling the competition, figuring out a legitimate winner over a designated course. Rules also determine the precise distance, the particular rules about the timing, when your clock actually starts in your race. Is it when you start the finish line? Is it when the gun goes off? Whatever. And obviously there's also strict rules about performance-enhancing substances. All these different kinds of rules are the limits, the sort of boundaries that are placed on that frame by these organizations. But there's still a great deal of openness in the outer frame that we see with road races. Anybody can register for races, for most of them, with one notable exception. As long as you get in before the race fills up, you can register. And so anybody, you, me, anyone else, can basically compete on the exact same, on the exact same stage and the exact same venue as the runners who are winning these races, which is sort of unique. You're not going to get to play football probably right after an NFL team finishes their game on the field. You sort of get to compete in the same event with them. The fact that anybody can register becomes, and if you've been a spectator at marathons, you see there's all different kinds of people, all shapes and sizes, a lot of different type of people that are there. It starts to create a carnival-like atmosphere. There's a great celebratory feeling going on. And this carnival-like atmosphere is what creates this space for the stunt runners. To quote from Susan Bennett, the outer frame contains all those cultural elements which create and inform the theatrical event. The inner frame contains, oops, I got out of order. The inner frame contains the dramatic production in a particular playing space. The audience's role is carried out within these two frames, and perhaps most importantly, at their points of intersection. It's the interactive relations between audience and stage, spectator and spectator, which constitute production and reception, and which cause the inner and outer frames to converge for the creation of a particular experience. And then, so within the frame, though, the openness that I'm talking about, a writer and running advocate, Bart Yasso, who's a kind of a legendary runner and marathoner, he describes the phenomenon in this way. In many ways, the running world invites these sideshow antics. Unlike other sports, there are no hard and fast rules about what you wear. While professional football players wouldn't be allowed on the field without a helmet, marathoners don't even have to wear running shoes. They can run in high heels, combat boots, or fuzzy pink slippers. Heck, people have won notable marathons in bare feet. But even in this carnival atmosphere, there are crazy runners such as Coat Man who defy belief and are truly in a class unto themselves. So the inner frame. The inner frame is what is created by the ludic performance of the stunt runner. Again, they're able to do this because we're not necessarily limited by rules. And these are acts of play that subvert the marathon central function as athletic contests. They're turning it into something else, a different kind of experience for the audience. The thing is that with stunt runners, they really, for the most part, are rule followers. They follow the rules. But this type of play has to do with what theorist Richard Schechner calls more of an indeterminate type of play. It's anti-structural, with the main fun being of how one can get around the rules or subvert them. That's the kind of play that they're doing. There's one body of play theory that looks at play in terms of the way that it is distinct from everyday life or reality. And stunt running certainly has a relationship to that. It's, as I keep mentioning, it's double-layered, so which you could say it's twice removed from reality. In the one sense, it's the running, which is a separate from everyday life type of activity, running in a race, and then the performance of the stunt itself. Gregory Bateson uses this concept of metacommunication. He calls that players use to indicate to one another or signal to one another that they are now at play. Whether it's any type of play itself, there are things that occur. There's very explicit communication, and there's also metacommunication that happens. And so what's happening with stunt runners is that they metacommunicate through the use of their stunt to distinguish themselves from the rest of the runners. So as a part of momentary performance, the excessive nature of the performance, the stunt runner really thrives on the excessive nature of the performance because it metacommunicates much more clearly to the audience itself. In ways that stunt running is similar to everyday life, there are these concepts of flow where you sort of lose oneself in play, and stunt runners, anybody who runs knows what that flow state means when you're kind of losing yourself within the play. So that concept of the broad notion of flow, and also the reflexivity, and these are concepts that also come from Richard Schechner, an awareness that you're playing, a self-consciousness about the fact that you are playing. Let's see, what else do I want to say? Brian Sutton Smith, in The Ambiguity of Play, particularly looking at power, he describes what he calls the rhetoric of play as power, and the quotes here kind of help explain that. So it's the type of play that's the representation of conflict. It fortifies the status of those who control the play and its heroes, so both the outer frame and the inner frame winners. And he says it applies to competitions, where there's hierarchy, or for personal control in solitary play. It can also be a solitary activity, as in mastery and empowerment, using the play to gain empowerment. And yeah, and he says about children, the child plays because he doesn't have power in play, is seeking empowerment as a kind of compensation or wish fulfillment. So this is the kind of theoretical frame that stunt runners operate in. Destabilizing the marathon's purpose, they gain their own recognition, they construct a counter-narrative of the marathon through the theatricality of the stunt and the athletic accomplishment, and they they work on, again, enhancing the overall experience of the spectators. There's some fun quotes by some of the stunt runners. This guy named Gary Finelli, who calls himself the king of costume, and he runs marathons in various costumes. Sometimes they're stunts, sometimes they aren't. He describes himself as an entertainer. I wear costumes for the people so they can loosen up and not be stuffed shirts. And it's an uptight world. This is one way to relax. I talked about Coat Man and how he sort of decided that he was going to start running marathons in this fashion. He said, the most radical thing you can do in Miami is to put on a winter coat and run a marathon. You should drop dead. With the heat and the bulk and the way the coat makes it more difficult to run. But he also talks about the pleasure he receives from audiences seeing him cheering his name because he is so recognizable. And he considers it an art. He says, I think I have a valid art, but some people have accused me of being overly promotional of myself. A lot of people don't understand that this is art. I'm not copying Spider-Man or Batman. This is art. I consider myself a performance artist, and a marathon is like a 26.2-mile stage with 2 million spectators. I play to the crowd. It's like a show. Yeah. So within what they're doing, there is institutional resistance. People see it as overshadowing the normal race accomplishments, mocking or demeaning other runners. And it's hard not to see it that way when Coat Man says it's a satire. But again, not all runners have the same objective. Most of us are competing against ourselves, trying to see what we're actually capable of doing, whether that's our time, whether that's just finishing the race, whatever it might be. And sometimes the goal is this sort of playfulness versus the competitive aspect of the play, which can be abrasive. So Sutton Smith just emphasizes that there are always legitimate power interests that are intrinsic to the contest, so the way players move around within that is what's significant. As a last little anecdote, I just wanted to point out this example because Coat Man considers himself a performance artist, but this is a piece that was very self-consciously created performance art by Martin Creed. It was at the Tate Britain in 2008, and basically it consisted of a diverse array of runners differing in size, race, gender, form, and speed, sprinting across Tate's main gallery once every 30 seconds. Creed designed the work as an exploration of life and the human spirit in its fullest expression. In Creed's words, running fast is like the exact opposite of death. It's an example of aliveness. Since the gallery in which the piece was presented, it was just 86 meters in length, the audience could take in the entire performance as they started, dashed across the room, and then stepped out of view. He created a type of momentary performance that involves seeing a lot of different people run and sort of taking what you can from that. So it's just sort of another example of the type of momentary performance that can benefit from this type of analysis. And then I call this the new frontier, triugling. And how can I start that? To close, I thought I'd show this little video. Yes, it's juggling in triathlon. We had the first athlete to complete a full triathlon while triugling.